Confidence does not make it true. Reaction to Hamza's Saturday Shop Live. Throughout this live stream, Hamza covers a wide range of topics while interacting with customers in his shop and taking questions from viewers. He discusses the reliability of Gospels, the marriage of Muhammad to Zaynab, the age of Aisha, Quran 4.34, and repeatedly challenges Christians to explain why they believe Christianity is true. A recurring theme throughout the stream is that Christians often criticize Islam without first establishing that Christianity itself is true. On one level, I actually agree with that. If you're going to criticize someone else's worldview, you should also be able to defend your own. Christians should defend Christianity. Muslims should defend Islam. Atheists should defend atheism whenever they make positive claims. But watching this live stream also reminded me of something much broader. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make, not just religious people but people in general, is confusing confidence with truth. Just because someone has an answer does not mean they have the right answer. Throughout history, human beings have encountered mysteries they could not explain. Why is there something instead of nothing? How did life begin? Why does consciousness exist? Why do natural disasters happen? For most of human history, the honest answer to these questions was simply, I don't know. But human beings do not like uncertainty. We crave explanations. And that's understandable. It feels uncomfortable to admit ignorance. It feels much better when someone steps forward with a confident explanation that seems to make sense. The problem is that reality doesn't care how satisfying an explanation feels. Reality only cares whether it's true. That's why I think I don't know is one of the most underrated phrases in human history. It isn't intellectual weakness, it's intellectual honesty. One argument I often hear from Muslim apologists, and from religious apologists more generally, goes something like this. Quote, you cannot explain abiogenesis. Or, quote, you cannot explain consciousness. Or, quote, science does not know how the universe began. Sometimes that's true. There are questions science has not fully answered. But here's the leap that I do not think follows. If we don't know something, that does not suddenly make one particular explanation true. Suppose I asked how life began. If your answer is Allah created life, that is certainly an explanation, but it is not evidence. You've still got work to do. You now have to demonstrate that Allah actually exists. Then you have to demonstrate that Allah created life. Then you have to explain why your explanation is better supported than every competing explanation. The fact that I don't know the answer does not move your explanation 1 inch closer to being true. The same principle applies everywhere. Imagine someone asks, what causes lightning? One person says, I don't know. Another person says, Zeus throws lightning bolts. The second person has an explanation. The first person has ignorance. But unless the second person can actually provide evidence for Zeus, all they've done is replace one unknown with another. An explanation is not proof. Now, to be fair, this cuts both ways. Naturalism does not get a free pass either. If someone claims that a particular natural explanation is correct, that explanation should also be supported by evidence. The difference, in my view, is that scientific explanations are generally treated as provisional. They're based on observations, tested against reality, revised when new evidence appears, and abandoned if they no longer fit the facts. That's a very different attitude from saying, here's the answer, and then treating it as settled, regardless of what future evidence may show. Personally, if I don't know something, I'm comfortable saying so. I don't know exactly how life began. I don't know exactly why consciousness exists. I don't know why there's something rather than nothing. But I would rather honestly admit those gaps than fill them with explanations that have not been first demonstrated to correspond to reality. This is also why confidence by itself does not impress me. Some of the most confident people in history have been wrong. Confidence does not correlate with truth. Truth correlates with evidence. As I watched this live stream, I kept asking myself one question. Imagine just for a moment that every criticism of Christianity were correct. Imagine every historical objection succeeded. Imagine every Christian caller failed to defend their beliefs. What would that prove? It might show that Christianity is false, but it would not establish Islam. Islam still has to stand on its own. It still needs positive evidence for Allah, positive evidence for Muhammad. Positive evidence that the Quran is what it claims to be. Those questions do not disappear simply because another religion has problems. And this brings me to my final point. One reason I think religions have often been persuasive throughout history is that they offered confident answers to difficult questions in a world where very little was understood. When people did not know why diseases spread, why lightning struck, or how life began, a confident explanation could feel deeply satisfying. But satisfying explanations are not necessarily true explanations. If there's one lesson I take away from this live stream, it's this. If we genuinely do not know something, then I don't know is often the most rational answer available. Because inventing an explanation and then believing it simply because it sounds satisfying is not how we discover truth. If an explanation is true, it should be able to earn our belief by the evidence that supports it. Until then, confidence alone is not enough.